do you think it will ever be feasibly possible to clone a dinosaur?
I'll never say never, but every dinosaur remain that anyone's ever found is a rock, right? And so it's like this, it's complete rock. I think it's very unlikely we will ever clone anyone would ever clone a dinosaur. I think maybe one day, in the next 20 years, someone could get to the point that they could engineer something that was dinosaur-like.
You were at the Jurassic World Rebirth premiere, so what'd you think?
I loved it. I mean, obviously, full transparency, I'm a Gareth Edwards fan, friends with him, but I also I've loved his work for a long time. But I loved it. What was great about it was it didn't feel like it was part of the Jurassic World franchise. It really kind of felt like if you go back to if you go back to Lost World, if you go back to like Jurassic Park 2 and stuff, that's where it felt like it lived. And it had like Jaws vibes, it had Alien vibes, it had Goonies vibes, it had Indiana Jones vibes. And I feel like the dinosaurs and the mutant versions of dinosaurs, like the actual dinosaurs, like the T-Rexes of the world, and then like the D-Rex, right? I felt like there was a lot of suspense. Like that river scene, I was literally on like I mean, it didn't give you like this like in like that first sailboat scene with like you didn't even have to see the mosasaur, but just like when the boat was upside down and the kicking of the legs, it gave these like old school Jaws vibes. So I don't know, as a kid of the 80s, it felt like to me like an homage, like a Jurassic Park movie that like was done with like some of the best visual effects I've ever seen, wrapped in this like pretty cool storyline, wrapped in like every movie I loved of the 80s. So I mean I was pretty happy. So I had very high expectations because it's one of my favorite franchise, obviously. And then I mean this is a plesiosaur flipper, right? So I mean I'm obviously very all in on de-extinction and dinosaurs, everything else, right? And so and then it's like one of my favorite directors. So I had ridiculously high hopes, but I was pretty happy.
It reminded me a lot of Jurassic Park 3. And I know I'm gonna guess Gareth told you like, he wants it to feel like a 90s movie, and it does like not necessarily the first Jurassic Park, but more like a 90s adventure movie, which,
Yeah,
the
but
sci-fi.
that's like like my favorite movie of all time is Raiders of the Lost Ark. And so I love these adventure movies, right? Where you've got a little bit of cheese here and there, but they're fun. Like anybody that goes to that movie, even if they've seen zero Jurassic Parks, zero Jurassic World, will have a good time. And I feel like a lot of times people are looking for like, all these different things in film, but this was just a lot of fun.
When you watch this movie, or for that matter, any other Jurassic Park or World, are you watching going, oh, that's interesting. What a good idea of what not to do?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the D-Rex is something that is definitely not on the not to do list, right? And by the way, the Mosasaurus, which is technically a ancient reptile, aquatic reptile, not technically a dinosaur. The Mosasaur is also not that there is Mosasaur DNA, right? But that's also definitely on the do not touch list, right? I would definitely put it in the category of like Megalodon and D-Rex. But what's interesting is because we always talk at Colossal that part of our while we open source the technologies that we make for conservation to the world, and we're trying to do cool stuff that inspires kids and it's a lot of fun. But we also, there are real technologies that come from our work that have application to healthcare. And I love that subplot in the movie, right? Because it's like we always talk about de-extinction and how advances in de-extinction can also not just help conservation, not just make cool animals and inspire kids and restore ecosystems, but we talk about that it can we can truly monetize some of the technologies that come from it. And so having a plot around the actual monetization of the dino DNA of the secrets of the genomes of the dino DNA is like straight in the wheelhouse of like our investor pitches. And so I feel like we just keep getting drawn closer and closer comparison to Jurassic Park in weird ways. But we obviously didn't know that before we saw the film. But now when I'm having conversations like, well, did you after it comes out, everyone sees Jurassic World Rebirth. I will be able to say, well, just like in the movie where they were pursuing it, there are actually genetic advances for humanity out of the work. So,
Out of curiosity, do you find interest like just the public's interest in Colossal bumps every time one of these movies comes out?
you know, it's hard. It's hard to say, right? Like, I think the public interest is pretty high. I think the best thing that we can do to bump our public interest is continue to deliver and continue to educate. And I think that one thing that we've done a really good job on is, which by the way, this is a weird statement to make in an interview, but I've always wanted to build, Harvard meets MTV because I want, we need the top echelon of scientists, to deliver the work, but I also want to make it fun and digestible so that kids, understand it, right? And I'm a big believer that pop culture drives influence and interest, right? As I think the general public does, right? Like there's a lot of people that come to you guys because they're excited and they're passionate about the content that you guys put out, right? And so if we can sprinkle in real science into it, that's even more exciting. And so, sometimes I get called out because certain people don't like it that we put like we're currently working on some cool social content with Universal and with Gareth and with Jurassic, and so we'll release that in over the next month. And in that process, I'm sure there will be certain, even though we've got, Nobel laureates and we work with 15 of the top universities in the world and we have 172 scientists, and I would argue some of the best in the world, there will be a subset of some people that will be like, you know, they shouldn't, be talking to things like Screen Rant and Den of Geek, and they should be not be joking around with Jurassic World. But at the end of the day, like if you can't make some of the things that we're working on fun and exciting for kids, then you're putting it on the shelf for this like elite, and this like, and that's just not kind of the vibe. So, I would hope that movies like Jurassic World Rebirth get people more and more excited about Colossal. But I think we have to take advantage of these moments and come and integrate them with actual true deliveries, like the woolly mouse or the direwolf, so that people can see the results of the science, and then you plug them into the pop culture.
Not to, advertise too much for the new Jurassic World. I do appreciate that they have a scientist, again, a paleontologist who
Yeah,
is a central character. Like one of the things I very much enjoyed about the original movies, you had real experts who, probably because of Michael Crichton, there was a credibility to the
yeah,
authority of someone like Sam Neill's character, Jeff Goldblum's Ian Malcolm.
right.
And yeah, I think that putting that out in the world, credibility and experts is a good thing right now.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so I think that if as long as we can deliver on the science and marry it with, fun pop culture, well, then people have more excitement and people are going to be more excited. And, I assume, I don't know anything secret, but I assume they're going to continue to make more Jurassic films.
I think
Uh,
there are plenty of more islands left to be discovered, but
right, right.
or revisited. But one note related to these Jurassic movies, I know the last one was not many people's favorites. It was a little bit strange for a reunion movie that they made it about locusts, but that actually was, I thought, interesting to talk to you about because is that something that Colossal, you all talk about or wonder about what are the scientific quandaries there? Because in that movie, to remind folks, it is not a nonprofit, it's not a company interested in de-extinction or preservation, but a company uses gene editing and CRISPR to create something commercially beneficial that has negative side effects. Is that something y'all talk about?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about it all the time, right? I think that we live at such an interesting, point because like access to compute, AI, eventually quantum, and genetic engineering, that is like this perfect Venn diagram of technologies. And I think that we're going to be moving into a world very much like in the Jurassic franchises, where you're moving from genetic experimentation to truly scientific experimentation to scientific engineering, right? These are going to be just engineering challenges, and we always say that here at Colossal is that, we don't know everything, but we know enough that, 80% of our work is engineering and 20% of it is scientific discovery. But I think that over time, that number just shrinks and it's mostly genetic engineering. So I think you're going to have a lot of companies and a lot of capabilities for a lot of companies to create all kinds of different types of life. But I'll also, I'm an eternal optimist. I think you know this about me, but also opportunities, right? So if you look at, one of the companies that I hope we share more about it later this year. I'm just on the board of it now, so I don't run it day to day. But breaking.com, which is our plastic degradation company, we're in 14 pilots right now. And just to remind you and everyone, is that there's an incredible team led by Sukanya and others that discovered this microbe that literally breaks the chemical bonds of plastic. So it's not making smaller plastics that like go into our water and we ingest and whatnot and end up in our bodies. It's actually breaking the chemical bonds of plastic, right? And it's just making biomass. It's returning it back to its natural state. And so that's why we named it breaking. But what's interesting about that, and what I think is very fascinating about it, is that we are using synthetic biology to take things that take this microbe that breaks things down that are either never could break down or break down in 800 years. We've compressed it to 22 months. We're now trying to get it to 22 days and then 22 hours, right? And so using genetic engineering and AI to help model all of this. And I think that while creating genetically modified organisms, whether they're like the movies in Jurassic World Rebirth or like a microbe to destroy plastic, I think synthetic biology will give us, coupled with AI, will give us that ability at a pretty grand scale. So I do think that we're entering into this world where we can be, while some of it could end up very dystopian, I'm an optimist. I think that we're going to have opportunities to like clean up plastics in our bodies and in the oceans and everywhere else. And,
I was
I
going
think
to
that's
say, could it be applied to the plastics already floating in the ocean?
yeah, yeah. And so it's pretty interesting. Yeah. And so like right now, everything is done in a bioreactor and with just salt water. So it's pretty cool.
Uh, yeah, I did not. That is very interesting. And yeah, I guess again on the flip side, because we're talking about Jurassic, so that's a good application, but you don't see there's a future in companies just trying to combine animals. I don't
I
know.
do. I mean, I think, I mean, who knows, right? I think that there will be. I think, there will be people that, try to push it probably more for like ag tech type plays, right? Like, can we make people are already looking, there's, I think, a single gene mutation that causes hornlessness in cows. And so cows, for example, when they don't let necessarily in America live on these beautiful free range Yellowstone parks as they may be advertised at Whole Foods, right? Most of them are in pretty gross places. And one of the problems in the cattle industry is if they grow horns, they literally will like go. They're so close they'll gore each other, right? And there's infection and disease, and that can spread through the whole population. And so there are researchers that have discovered a single. I think it's I need to research this, but we're not working on it obviously right now. But it's like a single gene edit, or maybe one or two edits that causes hornlessness. Because right now they go in and dehorn the cows, which is also a pretty weird, animal
Cruelty.
right issue. And so they actually have a way to make these genetically modified cows that then don't have horns, right? So then there's no issue with the herd in these populations for food or in issues for dehorning them. But and so I think that you're going to see applications like that first. I think social pressures and whatnot will hopefully keep people away from the Godzillas and the King Kongs of the world.
One thing I have trouble believing in these most recent Jurassic worlds is that people would ever get so tired of dinosaurs that they're like, you know what?
That's what I said.
Yeah,
I said that exact same thing at the after party. I was talking to someone about it, and I said, yeah, and it's like if you take a kid right now that's even if they've seen things on YouTube or seen things on like Apple TV or other, if you take a kid and you take them, to a zoo and you show them an elephant, just an elephant, right, which is not a dinosaur, people are they're blown away by it. They're like, that's huge and that's amazing. And I've never seen like, and they've seen they know that elephants aren't like this scarce resource that they've never seen before, haven't exist. So that was the two hard things I had to believe in the film. Like these were the two weirdest things I thought about the film was that one, people, and they did this in other Jurassic Worlds, people are going to get over dinosaurs. I just don't believe that. I think kids, like, if you had a dinosaur, kids lose it every day. The second thing is they say when they see, what people don't always realize is these large theropods and these large sauropods, you know, um, these giant like brachiosauruses and these giant like T-Rexes, they're like 35, 40 years old when they reach that size, right? And so it's not like they come out of the egg and they're that size, right? And so it takes a while for them to grow that. And so the only thing that they haven't solved in the Jurassic World and Jurassic Park franchise is, do they have some type of accelerated growth mechanism so that they get to this like epic size where people don't have to wait 40 years, right, for them to grow, right? Because they're living creatures, right? And so it was funny as my chief science officer and I talked about it, and we're like, yeah, the most plausible, the thing that was the weirdest thing is like they say that in 35 years they've got these giant dinosaurs, or they say a few years later they have these giant dinosaurs, and it's like probably doesn't work exactly like that. It takes a longer time for them to grow. They don't have like an accelerated growth, gene. At least they never talk about it in the film.
Oh yeah, well they have on the flip side they would have years of the petting zoo phenomenon, or where you can ride your own brontosaurus or
Yeah,
triceratops. Yeah.
until it gets too big. Until it gets too big. Yeah.
But then it becomes all awe-inspiring. Well, also just to get this out of the way because the new movie's out, it ever in your do you think it will ever be feasibly possible to clone a dinosaur?
So there is no dino DNA. And so that gets people really sad. It also gets people really excited. Some people are really excited because there is no dino DNA that we've discovered. I'll never say never, but every dinosaur remain that anyone's ever found is rock, right? And so it's like this, it's complete rock. But I would say net not, maybe there's some kind of material that did store it through 65 million years. We're using a DNA that's 1.2 million years, 1.5 million years old. That's the oldest DNA. Most of our DNA is like hundreds of thousands to 50 to hundreds of thousands of years old for our projects. But there we do have DNA that's over a million years old, but not 65 million years old. And so that's just rock. So I don't think it's going to be ever possible to I wouldn't say never. I think it's very unlikely anyone would ever clone a dinosaur. But I do think that, using AI, ancestral state reconstructions and protein coding regions and understanding enough as science moves from discovery to just pure engineering, I think maybe one day, in the next 20 years, someone could get to the point that they could engineer something that was dinosaur-like. I do believe that long term and the kind of technology suite for humanity that will exist.
It's good seeing you again. The last time we did talk was right before the Direwolf news was public, and
Yeah.
obviously even beforehand, I was well aware what a big deal that was. But
Yeah.
what was it like? How was it like going through that reaction when the world discovered direwolves?
It was crazy. When people don't, everyone kind of focus. It's funny. It depends on what segment of the population you talk to, but we got over 28,000 stories written the first week. Time Magazine told us that, we drove more traffic to Time in the first day than they had in the last 2.5 years, which is crazy. And then of those like we also had 390 billion media impressions and 68% positive. And we had some people that were like, well, are you worried that, it wasn't 100% positive? And I was like, I told my board I thought it was going to be 20% positive. I mean, wolves are moderately polarizing. We made a genetically modified Pleistocene wolf, right? And so we brought back a wolf that had been extinct for 10,000 years that's bigger and stronger than normal wolves. And so I was like, I kind of assumed we were going to have 20% positivity. So we ended up being significantly positive, more positive than I thought. And so, but it was crazy. I mean, the influx from, capital sources, the influx from excitement of fans, our jobs, we have, hundreds of people that apply to Colossal. It went to like 5,000, like like and people from top university, like so like we had this influx of recruiting, this influx of excitement, this influx of people that wanted to put more capital into the business. Because of the Red Wolf work, we had government start reaching out to us saying, how can you help us with our species? So it went from like, we're excited about Colossal and there's a potential here, to the science works. And if
Well,
this is the first step, if this is your first step, then we're very excited about step two.
discussed it last time as North Carolinian. The Red Wolf element is very interesting to me, and I know you couldn't say, but since then, have you started working with governments perhaps on other endangered species?
Yeah, we have. We've got some announcements coming up in the next 2 weeks that'll have broader applications around that. And so the answer is yes. And we have an announcement specifically around technologies for endangered species. Outside of the work that we've done in bioacoustics and the cloning of the red wolf, we've got a pretty big announcement that it may not be until September that we talk about it. But yeah, we've got a couple things that we're pretty proud of on the applications conservation front that we will announce this year.
You were aware of it beforehand. There would be some pushback. Do these count as the same dire wolf? And that will obviously be an ongoing debate. But what is interesting to me is the opportunity that what you've created, what Romulus, Remus, and Khaleesi can teach us about dire wolves. Like, could you
Yeah.
see what you've learned from observing these three wolves that have told us
Yeah.
stuff we didn't know before about the original dire wolf?
Yes, it's a great question. So, from the fossil record, we know that they are tracking, well, we believe they're on track to track roughly size and shape. But that's all we have. We have the fossil records, right? And what we knew from the DNA, the deep dive in the DNA, and specifically the two samples. Because remember, there's 60,000 years of genetic divergence between our two samples, right? There's more genetic divergence in time between sample one of the direwolf and sample two of the direwolf than sample two in today. Because it was only 13,000 years old and the other one's 73,000 years old. And so what's interesting about that is like what we found is that dire wolves were white, which kind of tracks their Pleistocene wolf, but because people thought they were closely related to coyotes or to jackals, that they were red, right? But they actually were white. The genes tell us that. But we didn't know but the genes don't tell us what the hair is going to be like. It doesn't tell us what the texture is going to be like, right? And so when we put those genes in and modify them, and we can then actually see the dire wolf fur for the first time ever. It's thicker. It almost looks like polar bear-esque. Their tails almost look like long foxtails, so they're so much thicker than and bushier than like a normal wolf's tail. And it just like, and when they wet, it still like clumps so interestingly, right? And so we know, so we learned a lot. We couldn't learn that from the fossil record, and even from the genetics, even though that we learned that they were white from the genetics, that could prove that, because 60,000 years of genetic divergence with that as a fixed as a fixed color, implies that, and they were from two different regions, that probably most of them were white, if not all. And then we didn't sample all direwolves, right? So we don't know, but it's pretty good. It's a great indication, right? But then actually seeing it's interesting. And then they are behaving because they're raised, with human intervention. They're now at this point where they're transitioning, like where Khaleesi is still a little puppy-like, but the rest of them, Rhymus and Remus, they're now becoming more and more wolf-like. And so, like, I was in the ecological preserve a couple weeks ago, and I bottle fed Remus, right? But they were still, Remus was still staying pretty far away from me at the time that we were there, right? And so we're starting to see some of those wolf-like characteristics, which is great from a socialization perspective and animal health perspective. That's great, but I think we'll need to wait more time because we're seeing the physical attributes of the direwolf come through, but we need to still see the attributes as it relates to what their behavior is like.
Do you see yourself having a Pleistocene park one day?
I think we'll have large, expansive ecological preserves, right? And I think that realistically, some of these species, could be seen through ecotourism in partnerships with governments and indigenous people groups, right? It's like, if we return dodos back to Mauritius, and that can drive economic value for the country of Mauritius, right? Not like in a zoo, but out in the wild of Mauritius. Then yes, I see it in that capacity, but not in a capacity of like a park per se.
Yeah, I would love to talk more about that and plenty of other things. So,
Yeah, we've got some more stuff that's coming out soon that we're finalizing the plans on tomorrow, and then we'll ping you.
all right. Thank you so much. Good stuff.
Great talking to you, David.